When I first met him 50 years ago, his name was Bubba, and that's what I knew. Then he got married, and I think the name went to Everett. And then as I got to know some of his pals from UVA and wherever, it went to Dolph. But the longer I knew him, I named him the Great One, because that's what he was.
How he taught us to be loving and forgiving and non-judgmental. How he taught us to always stand up for what we believed in, regardless of the consequences. How he taught us to always cheer for the underdog. I'm sure my mom would want me to share stories about how my dad taught his children the importance of being honest, probably better than any father ever could. How he taught us the importance of having faith in God, both by his words and by the example he set.
Everyone here today knows how smart a guy Everett was. I think he had an IQ of 160. Well, but there was a very small part of his brain that I really don't think was fully developed. Probably just because there wasn't enough room left after God developed the high IQ part of his brain.
My brother approached his grave like one who wraps the drapery of his couch about him and lies down to pleasant dreams.
But Everett seemed to have a deeper purpose. Everett was, as Abraham said, blessed to be a blessing. It's as if in knowing that he had received these blessings, he was dedicated to being a blessing to others.
Thank you so much, Bubba, Dolph, Everett, for being in our lives and for showing everyone how to live a life full of love and caring, honor and integrity, faith and devotion.
I called him the Great One. And I don't know, Great One, life's going to be different without you. But I know all these people here, thank you for everything that you have done and helped us in so many ways. Your loyalty, your love, and friendship.
2 weeks ago, I heard that my dad was emailing and calling friends, saying goodbye, that he was going to pass away soon, and that he really cherished their friendship. So I immediately hopped on a plane and came down to Atlanta to see him in the hospital. Sat at his bedside with my mom and my sister and my brother for a few days. And to be honest, as a lot of you know who came to visit him during that time, he was sort of already halfway gone. He could hardly say anything other than, I love you, and I want to go home, and I want to go to heaven. So after 3 days, I was scheduled to fly out, and I went to go see my dad in the hospital before I went to the airport. When I got there, by the grace of God, he seemed a little more alert. He seemed a little alive. So I pulled up a chair right beside him, and I told my dad I wanted to hear about his life. I was probably going to be asked to write his obituary, and so I wanted to hear about his life from start to finish. For over 2 hours, we talked about his life. He told me about his childhood in Dunn. He told me about his high school days. I mean, he could hardly speak a word for the 3 days prior, and he was telling me the exact names of the awards and honors that he got in high school. We talked about his parents and how he lost them when he was young and what they meant to him. He went on and on about how the best decision he ever made in his life was marrying my mom. We talked about his faith in God. We talked about heaven. We talked about our relationship, and we also talked about how our relationship was similar and in some ways different than my relationship with my kids. We talked about everything. The Big Bang. He was quoting C.S. Lewis. It was incredible. It was truly a miracle. But after 2 hours, I realized my dad was starting to fade a little, and I asked one final question, which ended up being the last question I ever asked my dad. I said, Dad, you lived such a wonderful life, and now it's coming to an end. What was it that really excited you? What was it that got your juices flowing, kept you so positive and happy and enthusiastic for 75 years? What was it that really made you tick? And my dad looked out the window and thought about it for a minute, and he looked back at me, and he said, I really loved to help people. And he nodded his head and said, I really loved to help people. And that was it. He didn't elaborate. After saying, "I love you" and goodbye, he faded back to sleep. But he didn't need to elaborate. I knew exactly what he meant. You all know what he meant. My dad loved to help people. So I'll ask again, if you don't mind, for Bubba's 8 grandkids to see, if my dad helped you in some significant, meaningful way in your life, if you would please raise your hand. Look at that, guys. That's what your Bubba was all about. You're about to hear some hilarious stories from Danny and Sid, and my Uncle Randy's going to read a poem that you probably won't understand because I don't understand it. And they're going to be hilarious and cherish them. Your granddad, your Bubba, was one of a kind, but above all else, that right there is what I want you to remember about your grandfather. If you remember nothing else, I want you to remember he loved to help people. And we will all miss him so much. Thank you.
So I wish you could have had the image that we had up here when people were raising their hands because Everett had done something significant for them. His deeper purpose, his use of his gifts and blessings, it was for us. Because the glory of God is a human being fully alive.
Farewell, my brother. I don't know when my time will come, but when it does, I'm sure you will follow in your footsteps until we meet again.